All right, so this is what we call the Afterburn. So if you have comments or questions about this particular teaching, I will also allow you to ask questions about part 1 as well, if you have questions from last week and this week. I would prefer it to be just this week. If you have questions about anything that I may have peripherally touched on, it's not actually a part of the teaching, or anything else that's not a part of the teaching, please just contact the ministry directly. You can contact us through the MTOI.org website, our MTOI phone number, and we will try to reply as fast as we can. The point is this: you start counting. This is my opinion. You can stand before Yahweh and say, I said this, it's fine. Okay? I believe in our situation in the dispersion, you start counting the year you find out that you're supposed to be counting. Does that make sense to everyone? In other words, if you just found out about a second and a third tithe this past 2 weeks, this is year 1 for you. Start doing what you need to do in a year 1, which is first and second tithe. Then you get to third year, then you do the third. So this is year 1, then year 2, then you get to year 3. You start counting. I'm not going to put out that this is year 3, and some of you, it's your first time, you're stuck in year 3. It's supposed to be, that's a little rough the first time you're tithing, right? You didn't know anything about it, now you got to do 3 of them. Let's start counting based on your point of reference, where you start. Now, if in the future you meet somebody, they come and you're talking to them and they find out about this tithing thing, and let's say it's September and the year is basically almost over. The tithing year finishes at the end of Shemini Atzeret, at the end of the last feast. Okay, that's the tithing cycle. Okay, so that person is almost at the end of the year. They can start year 1 that next after Shemini Atzeret, because after all, they'd only have a 2-month year 1. If they start in September, a 1-month year 1, depending on when the feasts are, maybe a couple of weeks. And so I say, if you're not sure, counsel. So certainly you could ask me, Caleb, during the Oneg, and we could talk more. But counsel, but you would start your own counting. But you're going to have to keep track of what year it is for you. That's part of your responsibility. See, we're so used to dishing off responsibility. That's sort of the mainstream Christian mindset. Anything bad, we'll pass that off on the devil. Anything good, we'll pass it off on Yeshua. I don't get nothing and don't have to do nothing, and I just get to go walking through life. And so you have to be responsible for you. You have to know what year it is in your cycle. Mark it on your calendar somewhere. Have it someplace where you keep track of it. Stick it up on the wall or something. Okay, but you need to kind of know what year you're in. Maybe we can make little MTOI number things that you can just hang up, and it's the tithing cycle. Tithing year 1, and then each year you change that out and hang something else up. We'll make a nice MTOI logo. We'll have it have a nice image on it, kind of like on the coin, and we could have that as sort of the symbol that could be there. I know we could do something like that.
So if you have people that you're contracting with and you're paying that contract, do you tithe on that?
If you have people that you're...
Okay, I have a business, PT. I have PTAs working for me. They're contractors. I'm paying them a certain amount every week or month. Do I still tithe on that?
Well, you don't tithe on the money before you give it to them. No, that's not part of income.
I just don't want to.
But still, your business's income does not count what you're paying employees. You got to take the employee pay out of there first. Okay, I'm talking about not necessarily taking out things like, I had to buy a new uniform or I had to get gas or something. I mean, then we're starting to nickel and dime Yahweh. No, but if you have a business, okay, and you have an employee that gets, $10 an hour, well, that's going to come out of the business before the business would tithe. Now, if you have a business and you get an income from the business, well, you're just tithing on your income. Now, you can also have your business tithe. We have some people that actually send us, because their business, their corporations do tithe basically their net profit after paying the business expenses. That's a whole different thing than your own personal thing, okay? And so you can certainly do that as a business.
I just wanted to ask for clarification on when exactly the second and third tithes become relevant, I guess. Is it after you've covenanted then, or is it if you're still just, I don't know. I just don't know when it would, like for me, like I haven't done the mikvah yet, or anything. So I just don't know when that would be relevant.
Okay, so good question. So she said, when does it become relevant to actually keep the tithes? I believe that Scripture talks about that the same Torah applies to the ger as well as the Israelite. So while you're a ger, which is what you would be as you're getting ready to mikvah, then the same responsibilities would be there as when you're already in the covenant. And so again, the safest thing as a maximalist is to start doing it as soon as you know about it. Now, of course, if you already know you're going down the road towards committing to be a part of the body and you have an income because you have a job, so there's money that comes in, I would be tithing on it. And also that way you would have the second tithe so that you can go to the feasts. And especially if you're a teenager, then you don't have to ask your father or anybody in your family to take care of you going to the feasts, but you'd have your own money. Okay? So I would say that especially once you turn 20, and if you're covenanting or heading towards mikvah to covenant, then for sure you would be responsible. Before 20 and before covenanting, I would do it if, I would check your heart on that one. Okay? But I would say again, there's no thought or option. You're 20 and you're in the body, you need to be doing it. If you've been in that water, you definitely need to be doing it because now you're claiming to be covenanted. Any questions, don't hesitate to take it again privately and ask me for your specific situation. All right? But if you have an income, I would tithe on it if you want to have blessing in your income. And it works if you're 19 or if you're 92. It works either way. So you don't have to, it doesn't matter how old you are. By the way, it works even if you're not covenanted yet. Okay, secular people tithe and it still works. It's a universal principle of flow, of abundance. It just works, period.
I was curious, on Deuteronomy 12, where it says, you're not, and we were talking about how grain was a tithe back then and different things like that, but now in our commodity, it's more financially a lot of times what we tithe. And I was kind of wondering about this, how this all fit together. You are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain or your new wine. But then if you keep going down to 18, it says, but eat them before your Elohim in the place which your Yahweh, your Elohim, chooses you and your son and your daughter and your male servant. And we talked about the place that he chooses us to tithe those gifts. So I'm not sure what's really going on there.
Well, this is talking again back to the second tithe in the feast. You're going to go and keep the feast in the place he says to take. Because when you're taking your tithes to the place, that's usually the 3 times a year you're showing up with the tithes, and you have your second tithe with you, and you're enjoying and eating that tithe. And so that chapter 12, when you see the one where it says, but eat them, where you get to eat it, it's referring to the second one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because otherwise we have a contradictory seeming scripture where there's certain things you can't do and then other places it says you can do it, and you can't be told you can't and you can to the same exact thing. So it has to be 2 things. The first one you can't, the second one you can. The first one you can't eat of, the second one you can eat of. But what you can't do with either of them is do it anywhere you want. You got to take it to the place where he places his name. Okay? Manny.
I have a good friend who would like to know, are the second and third tithes held just as equally important like the first tithes? So by not doing the second and third tithe is then sinning? So we are commanded to do all 3 tithes?
Correct. They are equally important. First of all, he wants you to celebrate the feast just as much as he wants you to support the Levite to have no inheritance, just as much as he wants you to make sure that the widow and the orphan and the poor have the third tithe. All of these things are important to him equally. They all serve different functions. You need a priesthood for what that does for you. You need the time with the body away from the world, which is what the feast second tithe does for you. And the poor need the benevolence available to take care of their needs, and you need to be benevolent. Because that's why he says that's why the poor are always with you, because you need to understand what it means to take care of others who have need. So they're equally important. And so not doing any one of them is, again, breaking a commandment, and that would be sin. And by the way, this is one of those commandments where very clearly the only one you heard is you. He's not going to punish the poor because you don't tithe, and he's not going to punish anybody else because you don't have enough money to go to the feast. And he's not going to punish the Levite because you didn't send the tithe. He'll provide it one way or the other. So the only person you heard in this one is you. which is why we never, put the old guilt trip on you. Well, without your help, this ministry wouldn't exist. Listen, if Yahweh didn't want this ministry, you could help it all it wanted, it'd still fail. And if none of you gave anything and he wanted it, it would still flourish. You have an opportunity that's available to you to participate. You are not necessary to the system. Just like they were told, hey, Yahweh could raise rocks to Abraham, as sons of Abraham if he wanted to. Okay, we are not necessary to any of this. We have an opportunity that we need to not squander. Okay, that's the key. There's an opportunity here that we must not squander. Billie Jean.
Yes, I can't even begin to tell you what tithing has did for my life. it would take me forever to tell you all the things that's happened because of my tithing. But it just works. I get excited to tithe because I just can't wait to see how Yahweh is gonna bless me. And I've never made a lot of money, but I've always had everything I needed. And I've not always tithed, but I see it more the times that I have, and since I've been into tithe. So it is a blessing. I look forward to it.
Amen. Thank you.
Although I'm on Social Security, so I'll just be giving offerings.
That's right. You're making offerings now. That's fine. By the way, without being out of school, she's the one that said to me one time, I know the only reason we have made it as little as we've made is because of the tithing. Okay, Billy's one of the ones who told me that. And so I hope that doesn't, come out of school. But that's something that, remember I said that last week. I said, look, there are people that have told me that they know the only reason they've made it is because of tithing. As little as we make sometimes, that may be the thing that just keeps you above, because it brings enough blessing and enough intervention and enough of whatever it is that he needs to do for you, that if you don't have that coming. And it really does make a difference. Wayne?
I just wanted to get your intake on this. Say somebody have to go overtime and work on Friday, and they have to work a little bit past sunset, and it's kind of like a two-part question. And anything that they make, what I heard, anything that they make during that time, they would just tithe the whole thing for that, because that's Yahweh's time. And if anybody has had to work on Saturdays, they would just take their whole income that they would make on that day and just tithe it, because that's automatically Yahweh's, because it's Yahweh's time that you're working with.
Okay, so there's some confusion in that whole thing. Let me clarify the confusion, okay? All right, so first of all, if you are doing anything that's going to require working into Friday night, into Shabbat, okay, the only exception would be what we call emergency services. Now, that means that you're working in the police, the fire, the EMTs, the ambulance guys, the emergency room guys, emergency services. That includes the watchman on the wall. There was always a watchman every day, all day. There was somebody on the guard duty. Now, if you're in emergency services, first of all, you don't get to decide that you're in emergency services. You need to counsel and ask. I've had people think they were in emergency services because, hey, after all, people need to get gas, so I work at the gas station. Well, they don't need to get it on Saturday, okay? So let's be careful that we think we're in emergency services when we're not. Call for counsel, because if you do, guess what? If you're wrong, it's on the person who gave the counsel, not on you. Take that burden off of you, put it on me, put it on whoever you call. Don't put it on yourself, okay? By the way, you can't just call anybody. You have to call someone who you can say, look, I vetted out, this was an anointed, appointed, and that's the person I thought I'd call, knowing full well that I had to trust what they said, Deuteronomy 17, and walk in that. So let's be careful that we're not talking about something that's not emergency services. Emergency doesn't mean your boss says it was an emergency because he needed you to come in. That was his emergency. That's not an emergency. We're talking life, death issues, okay? Life, death issues. My children both each had one time, maybe second, where for whatever reason ended up in the hospital in an emergency room, and both times were Friday nights. Can you believe that? And you know what? I was so glad somebody was there. in that emergency, okay? And so, man, I couldn't do that on another day. Both of them were on Friday nights. We're enjoying Shabbat, and then somebody trips, hits their head, and the next thing you know, you're in the emergency with a cut, whatever. Anyway, so that's number one. Let's make sure we're not dealing with emergency service. So if you're not in an emergency service, okay, a necessary service, necessary meaning life and death, then if you are being asked to work occasionally even on Shabbat, you need to find another job. You need to figure something out. And I know that a lot of you find that to be a struggle, but you know what? In my whole life, I never worked a job that required Saturday. There are lots of jobs that don't require Saturday. You can find them. If you don't have the skill set for it, you can get retrained, because maybe you need to be retrained. Listen, you planned your life not thinking you needed to keep Shabbat. Now you found out about it, so now you got to make adjustments. It's terribly inconvenient. But so is death and not having eternal life. That's pretty inconvenient too. Okay? So I want to be inconvenienced and get eternal life. If that's okay with you, that's what I would do. I don't mind the inconvenience if I get to live forever and be with Yahweh and all of you for the rest of eternity. So that's number one. What I have counseled, in my opinion, and I take it on me, if you are in an emergency service, that I would not keep the money made on the Sabbath, because I should only be doing emergency services because that's where my heart is, not because I think it's just a great income. If my heart is to keep you safe and to be there as part of, emergency issues, fires, police, medical, then I should be doing it because it's my heart. Then I shouldn't benefit when I have to work on Saturday. And then it's not tithing, because we're not taking 10%. You're just donating as an offering the entire amount. Because you should not be benefiting from something that's coming out of your heart that's work to produce. Because the Sabbath is a rest from your work to produce, your avodah. Okay, the work to produce. And so I have people that are in the hospitals that work one Saturday a month or 2 Saturdays a month as part of their, their rotation in the ER. And so that's what they do. They take that one day's amount, they do the math, figure out what they get paid for the day, and they just send it in. That way they're not benefiting, they're doing it because that's where their heart's at. Okay? I mean, these are people that should be doing it. If they didn't need the money, they do it for free because it's where their heart's at, if you understand what I'm saying. That it was not about the money. But if you are being asked, even very rarely, to eke into Friday night an hour or two into sundown, that's 1 hour or two too many. And if it happens once, it'll happen twice and 3 and 5 and 10 times. Call the ministry, get counsel, plan to get a new job. Or make a real strong stand with your boss first and see if he wants you bad enough as an employee. By the way, if you are that good an employee and have been at your job long enough and have a boss that has half a brain, he'll know how hard it is to get a good employee. He'd rather bend the rules for you than lose you. If you're that good, you can walk in the door and say, I don't want to leave. And I know that you know how much I bring to this company. And you should also know that replacing me isn't going to be so easy with all I do and the quality I do it. And so I'm going to recommend it. It's worth it to you to make an exception for me. You should be able to say stuff like that, but you got to, listen, if the boss looks at you like, you think you're all that? No, you need to be all that. You need to be the one person they trust, can rely on, can count on, that they would never want out of their business. The one guy that they say, I wish everybody was like so-and-so. Man, I wish all my employees were like Wayne. Comes early, stays late, works hard, never steals from me, gives me an honest day's work, does quality. I never have any issues with him. Don't hear foul language coming out of his mouth, blah, blah. I mean, if you're that guy, they'll keep you, or they're stupid. No, because I'm telling you, I've done consulting, a lot of business consulting. And I can tell you right now, I've been consulted just by guys who had trouble hiring good people because it's so hard to hire good people. So you be that person that they can't live without, and they'll let you do anything. I learned this lesson in sales. When I was working years and years and years ago in the early 90s for New York Life. And we had meetings that were compulsory we had to go to once a week or whatever it was. And there was always a couple of guys that never showed up. And I knew if I didn't show up, I would have been in trouble. I was brand new. And I asked somebody one time, hey, how come John never shows up? He said, because John's top producer. He does whatever he wants. He doesn't have to do anything as long as he keeps producing. You see, you be top producer, the most indispensable guy, they'll do what they need to keep you. At least you have a better chance. Is it making any sense? But if you're the one who's just barely getting it done and always looking like they're just kind of moping around and doesn't look like they're happy to be there and always whines and complains about it, they'll be happy to have an excuse to get rid of you. Why would they want to keep you? That's the approach we have to have. You got to become indispensable. So if anything's leaking into holy days and Sabbath, that job has got to go eventually, or they need to make an adjustment. You cannot make the adjustment, and you cannot just throw money at it. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Emergency services, I believe, is different because we need those people in those emergencies to be available. So, and they can't ask their bosses not to pay them. There's laws against that, so they have to get paid. Okay, because that would go against all the labor laws that they can't have them working and skip a day to pay. They can give you off when you want a day off without pay, but they can't give you a day on without pay. That puts them in trouble. So all you can do is just not take the pay. And in my mind, that makes some sense.
Just kind of on that same note, because I work at Volkswagen, and recently they're getting ready in the new year to switch over to everybody's going to be on a set shift, either days or nights. And I got put on night shift. And so I put in 6 requests to get switched over to day shift because I was like, I can't work Friday nights. Y'all hired me knowing this. And y'all usually call Friday nights because we're a production factory. Y'all call Fridays all the time. So if you switch me over, I can work that Friday. And everything got denied. And then finally they came up and I was like, look, do I need to worry about something here? Because if I'm never going to be able to work the full schedule, what's going to happen here? And they're like, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. If you do get fired for it, you for something like that, you get unemployment until you get hired back. We hired you saying you won't work this day and you won't work this day. That doesn't change. Okay. And you're a good employee. We're not going to fire you.
Yeah, you got to make a stand and you got to do that. But also, listen, if your boss has not realized that your Torah keeping benefits him, I'm not talking about your Torah keeping because you don't work Sabbath, but you're not stealing, you're not lazy, you're protecting his interests, your Torah keeping, your integrity. Because I always told people in my job interviews, my strength of saying I won't work Saturday or feast days is the same strength that I feel that I won't cheat you, I won't be lazy, I won't, you know what I'm saying? That's the same integrity I'm going to show across the board. I don't want them to think, well, you just don't want to work in those days, so you're going to say that's your big issue. No, all of it is a big issue to me. And if you don't see that, you're welcome to fire me anytime. Give me a shot to show you that I will be your most valued employee. But you got to be. A lot of you guys are just marking time at the job and just doing the minimum you got to do to get out of work each day. You're not impressing anybody. You impress that boss, he may want to keep you. Now, what if you don't want the job? Well, then go get another job. Don't act lazy and not treat that boss right. Find something you can sink your teeth into and get in there and really do it. And do it with all that energy and excitement that shows what it means to be a child of the living Elohim doing his job.
I just want to make 2 comments on tithing. I believe tithing is a celebration of Yah's ability or desire to take care of all of our needs. So it's not up to us to decide when to tithe or to tithe the Shabbat money, to tithe that or to donate that, because it defeats the purpose of what tithing is all about. It's a reminder that he takes care of us, of all of our needs. And then as far as working on when you have to work on the Shabbat, I have a job that people know for a fact I take Shabbat off, even though everybody else is working. And on big events, they very strongly say, we need you. But consistently over the years that I've been working there, I said, no, no, no. And so all of them are watching me, as a believer, how I conduct myself. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, if I decide just because I love the people I'm working for, I'm trying to witness to them, and I say, okay, on this, I'll make an exception and work on this Shabbat. But I know I'm donating all the money I make to Yah. But the people around me who are not believers, who've been watching me,
It would destroy
will not
everything.
know that. It'll destroy the very
Destroy
witness
everything.
you're meant
Yep.
to be.
Amen.
And so that was my comment about that.
Amen. See, that's why you can't just work any job and then just say, if I donate my money, it fixes anything. Okay? The only exception I was saying is that we have to have some way for people to still be ready when your house is burning or ready to come when you're having a heart attack. Somebody's got to be there to call. What else is going to work? And so we need those people to be there. But we also want to make sure that they're doing what they're doing without breaking Shabbat. I promise you, in Israel, there was always medical people available and security people available and military guys on the walls watching, always. But they weren't salaried the way we are today. They weren't paid the way we are today. It was a different system. And so that's why I said it's on me. It's not a scriptural thing. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You can use that in front of the throne, and then I'm okay with that. I understand that Abba will judge me for that, but I had to have some sort of way of answering the question, how do we have people available in these life-threatening moments and not actually be breaking Shabbat? We can't just depend on the Goyim to do it. Because if we were a nation, a cohesive nation, there wouldn't be any Goyim in the nation. So who's going to be doing it? You know, somebody's still going to trip and fall and hurt themselves and break their leg or break their arm or get a huge gash or something. Okay? And then so what's going to happen? Somebody's got to stitch that up or bind that up or whatever it is, even if it's Shabbat. All right? We don't have any assurance anywhere in Scripture that on Shabbat nobody's going to ever get hurt. Nothing's ever going to happen. Nobody's ever going to trip and fall or break their hip or anything like that. It's something that happens.
Okay, I have a question, and it's about tithe, but maybe a different direction. Like I was talking about taking care of my aunt, and you said, bring it to you to disperse for benevolence. When I bring my tithes to you, but when I see a need or somebody has a need and I just jump in and do it, am I interfering in something that maybe God's working with the person about?
Okay, I understand.
I mean,
I understand your question.
They wouldn't come to a church to get help if they had somebody that they could regularly depend upon. And another part is, my boss is let me, Sabbath is Sabbath, but he's not thoroughly convinced that people that keep Sunday that's not Sabbath too.
Well, you don't have to convince your boss of anything.
So,
Okay, as long as your boss is convinced to allow you to do what you need to do, that's all that matters. But the bigger question is this. There's a lot of talk in Scripture about taking care of the widow, the orphan, the poor. You absolutely are empowered to do that with your third tithe. The thing of the matter is that a lot of us, if we're not well trained in it, will end up feeding a black hole. In other words, a bottomless pit of just sponging benevolence. So it's best if you get direction and guidance from somebody in ministry who does this on a regular basis before you just take care of a need. Because you will be taken advantage of at some point, probably more often than not, okay? Because that person may be asking you and 27 other people and be doing just fine because they're getting it from all kinds of places. Or Abba may be allowing them to suffer because they're supposed to come and seek out ministry and get their life straight so that they don't need to get a handout. So I would not just give benevolence, okay, without getting guidance. Now, if something is clearly an immediate emergency, then you might take care of that, then contact the ministry about it, and then see what to do ongoing. But that's going to be very rare that you're going to run into something that is that urgent that requires some financial intervention. Okay? I mean, if you're dealing with somebody, I don't know, they're literally today getting booted out of their apartment. Not being threatened to be booted. I mean, like literally their guys are coming to throw them out if they don't pay something. Maybe that would be something to help them with. If they're really absolutely starving and you want to just take them to a restaurant or someplace to get them just some food at the store, go to the supermarket to buy them some food. But then check with the ministry to kind of put them in touch and plug them into something so we can do a better job of making sure that they learn how to fish and that they're just asking for fish. Okay? So it's not that you can't do it, but you're more likely to get taken advantage of doing it if you don't have really that experience set. Because even in the ministry, we get taken advantage of, but a whole lot less because we've seen enough to kind of know what to look for. Does that make sense? Okay? So I don't want to say, no, you have to let us do it. No, because that's ridiculous. I mean, you were supposed to also, by the way, in Israel, you were already helping the poor because you were supposed to leave the corners of your field ungleaned. And so that would be something that your tithe would have nothing to do with. You'd already be helping the poor every cycle of of the harvest, because you'd be leaving it there for them, the trimmings. And so when it comes to actually taking care of the poor, I think the safest way to do it is let the leadership do it and bring that person to the leadership's attention, and maybe we could do something in helping find out why they really are having the problem they're having and what's the right thing to do. Does that make sense?
You mentioned we can't depend upon the goyim, which are the people of the nations, the unbelievers. In this case, no, we can't. And since Abba actually gave the Torah to all of mankind, they don't recognize it at this point in time, but it's for them also.
Right.
So I think it would be wrong to even ask them to.
I think so too.
Anyway,
I think that was my point too. It was like, what do we do? Ask them to take care of everything? So,
no. Right. Also, you mentioned in Israel, the Orthodox community, not only the emergency workers, but if a family member ends up needing life-giving care, the life is put above the considerations of Shabbat. And a family member can drive them to the hospital or something like that, and they don't even bat an eye. Life is the highest thing. The laws of Shabbat are important, but when it means saving a life, they would not sit by and watch someone die. And it's just
the ox in the ditch.
Yes, exactly. And it's the human version.
Well, I'm just saying it's the ox in the ditch.
Yeah.
The ox in the ditch applies because if something is not done, somebody or something will die.
Right.
It's a life-threatening situation.
And and it's even among the Orthodox, the seat waving in the breeze. They go down the streets in these motorcycles that are for the Israeli version of hazmat when they're going to an emergency, and it doesn't matter. They serve on Shabbat also. Big brother.
So in other words, our Jewish community older brothers do exactly what I'm saying. Okay. So that was the point that Rachel was making. That this is exactly the way that the Orthodox Jewish community acts. They understand. And by the way, Yeshua taught us that with the whole ox in the ditch. Who would not go and get that ox out of a ditch on Shabbat? Otherwise it would break its leg or die or starve or do some other thing. I mean, it's not going to live. And so what more even with a human? Okay, with your fellow man.
From Rachel Johnson, how can a disabled, unequally yoked folks tithe without disobeying their husband?
Okay, this is a good question. I didn't put it in the teaching because I forgot. But it's a really good question look, you are only responsible to tithe your produce. If you are the wife and you don't have an income, what he does with his money, if he's not part of the body, is not your problem. Okay? So don't worry about it. Now, if you are the wife and you have a nice job and a nice career and a nice income, well, then that's your money and you ought to be able to tithe on it. And if you don't have a relationship with your husband where you can do that, well, you have other problems. Tithing's not your biggest problem. And so that needs counsel. So again, if your non-believing husband, let me start again. Your non-believing husband can do whatever he wants with his money. That's not your responsibility. Now, let me reverse the shoes. Your believing husband with a non-believing wife, you can decide to tithe her money and your money. You're the husband. That's just the reality. You can tithe both. But if you're just the wife and the wife is, making money and the husband doesn't want her to tithe, well, then you have a different relationship problem. Because after all, that's your money, you earned it, and you should be able to tithe it. And so that's a whole different issue. So that's going to require, so hopefully that makes some sense to everyone.
Okay, from John Billy, does giving our service away or giving our goods away count for tithes, like a doctor that treats the needy for free? Or say, like somebody providing, say, like a webmaster service or like something to the ministry as without charging, would that count as a tithe?
Well, first of all, it would absolutely depend on who's getting the service. I mean, if you're fixing my knee, I guess that could possibly work. And you'd have to really talk to us about what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. It sounds to me like you're trying to get around digging into your pocket and writing a check. And that's why you probably need to dig in your pocket and write a check, because you have an issue there. Now, you can make an offering of your services as part of your offering system, but I wouldn't be tithing necessarily your services. I'd be trying to figure out why you're trying to get around writing a check. Okay, I would say that you can voluntarily offer services as part of a donation, and you could, by the way, you could even get a tax deduction for that if you donate your services. I mean, the government allows you to do that. But no, I would say that tithing is tithing. That's where you take the 10th one. Now, if it was like not services but goods, if you had 10 sheep, you would give me the 10th sheep. That's proper tithing. Okay? But if you're a home builder, you're not going to give me the 10th home. I don't know how many homes would I need if every 10 homes you give me one. Okay? So I would say that there's an issue there with you and your money that you're trying to get around the process. So I'm calling you out. Sorry. But there's something else going on there, and you're going to have to deal with that in your own, inside you. There's something inside you that's trying to find a way to not have to write a check. All right, what else you got?
Okay, Amy Iponderan is asking about giving to the Salvation Army, and if that's something that we as Torah observant people should be giving to.
I would say that your ministry has more than enough good places to take the benevolence you want to give and to help people with it, that we don't have to give it to other ministries. And if we're not doing the bigger things like the Salvation Army, it's only because people are not giving it to us. They're giving it to the Salvation Army. Give it to us and we'll do the same things. If we have enough benevolence coming in, a third tithe coming in, and people write that down in their offering, that it's third tithe offering, then, as a matter of fact, we should probably put a button on the website that says third tithe so that we can mark it off more easily. So let's make a note of that. We make a third tithe button. But we could be doing mission work. We could be doing other benevolent work. We could be showing up at disaster relief places just like everybody else does. We're just too small at the moment. So whatever you wanted another ministry to do, like the Salvation Army, give it to us, talk to us, encourage us to use it in those directions, and we would be happy to do so. But let them know that it's coming from a Torah observant ministry so they can get pointed towards Yah, not pointed towards the guy with the big Santa suit ringing a bell in front of the store. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is where her question was originating from, but it came into my head as you were giving her the answer. Places like Salvation Army, Goodwill, Samaritan Center, places like that, sometimes the donations that they're giving are like furniture and clothing and stuff like that.
Oh, then do that. Do that. Yeah. I mean, if it's stuff that you're donating and getting rid of, you got clothing and furniture and things like that, absolutely go to Goodwill and places like that and because we don't have any way to deal with that anyway, okay? No, but if we're talking about if you want, like, putting a amount of money in a Salvation Army kettle, no, I'd rather you give that to us and talk to us about why you had wanted, what are they doing that you would like to see us doing? Because it's likely to be something that we're either already doing or should be doing, okay? You may come to find out we're already doing it, we just need more money to do it more.
If I cannot spend money on the Sabbath, then why are tithes accepted on the Sabbath? And they were not really sure how to answer him, and they're pretty sure that this person was sincere in his question.
Okay, no. I'm trying to think of how to deal with the simplicity of spending. You're buying something, you're purchasing something. Tithing, you're not purchasing anything. Okay, you're giving a required portion that belongs to Yahweh. You're bringing something that's his and saying, this is yours. It'd be like returning something that was borrowed on the Sabbath. Okay, so this is not yours. You're not buying anything. We're not doing any business. You're not purchasing anything. You're not getting anything in exchange, in a direct relationship, in exchange for that money. Right. Although some people do treat it that way. Robert said it's not a savings account. We've had people who called us for help with something because, after all, he gave us in the past, so he wanted it back so he could use it for something that really was not something that normally would be benevolence. But he just thought he was treating us like a savings account. It's just like, that's not what this works like. If you have need, we'll help you. But don't call us up because it's like you want to go buy, a fancy new car and you just want to buy a nicer one so you want some of the money back or whatever it is, It's not. This is what's happened in the past. I'm not making this up. We should do like a reality TV show called Ministry or something, because you would not believe the stuff that comes up. Now, look, first and foremost, you're giving it to Yah, and you're giving it to the place that you believe he's placed his name. And nowhere in Scripture does it say that you have to be concerned whatsoever with what the person you give it to does with it. Matter of fact, we're going to get to Malachi next week, and when we get to Malachi, the real main issue is in chapter 2, is that Malachi is addressing the priests. Chapter 1, he says he's writing it to all Israel. But in chapter 2, he's addressing the priests. And then when you get to chapter 3, he says, why do you rob, or will you rob Elohim? Will you rob God? And they're like, well, how are we doing that? He says, well, in the tithes and the offerings, in that they were not taking the tithe. The Levites, the priests, weren't to the high priests. Now, of course, so there wasn't a concern that the people needed to worry about what the Levites were doing with it, but Yahweh was concerned, and he was going to take care of it through a prophet and say, hey, you Levites, you were supposed to take a tithe of that and give it to the Kohanim. The Kohen deserved that 10%, and you weren't doing it. You're in trouble. Okay? So Abba will take care of that. If you're dealing with an anointed appointed, believe me, Abba takes care of those anointed appointed by keeping them straight as he can keep them. And if I start doing anything wrong with that money, believe me, he's going to make sure I know it. But also in this particular organization, we have leadership, not only here locally, but also in the bigger MTOI spectrum that meets every 2 weeks. And we talk about all these things. And by the way, we also share the numbers, and we know where the money is and how much money's there, and everybody's talking about their things so that we can help each other with how we handle the thing that can get you in the most trouble, money. And so we are very concerned about any possible accusation of wrong handling of money, poor handling of money. Very important to us. So what I would encourage any of you that actually have that concern, you're always welcome to contact us and ask us some questions. We're happy to answer them. Now, I'm not going to give you our financial statement. And I'm not going to tell you where every penny goes, but if you want to know the kinds of things that we do or how benevolence works, you can call us and we can tell you the kinds of things that we do and how we handle them and how we decide who we help and when we help them, etc. In other words, we have a criteria. As a matter of fact, we might eventually have a form that you could fill out so that you understand the criteria. Because people don't seem to understand that, Christianity or some other system out there has taught them to go to ministry first. No, I'm sorry, you go to ministry last. You do everything else yourself first. If you can't handle it yourself after all other efforts, then you come to ministry. Because Abba allowed you to be in that first and foremost to see what you're going to do with it. Not just look for a quick bailout. And so we need to be able to go through a process of you talking to us and explaining to us what you've done to try to fix your situation yourself. It's not that we don't want to help you. We want to help you. Bailing you out might not be helping you. We want to actually give you what's actually helpful. Sometimes money is not actually as helpful as being a little tougher with you. And so we have to identify what's really going on. All right, what else you got?
Okay, I guess there's a couple questions on third tithe, and I think you've answered most of them. Being along the lines of, can the third tithe be used at our local food bank or for a local charity? And then can MTOI add a donation option for the third tithe? And then third, is the third tithe required to go to the ministry that you're already giving the first and second tithes to?
Okay, so first tithe, and first of all, second tithe you're not giving to the ministry. Okay, you're using that for yourself in the feast. And of course, unless you have excess at the end. But all of your tithes goes to the ministry that's feeding you. You can give offerings to anybody you want, but your tithes go to one place. That's what it says, to the place where he places his name, that he's led you to, that place that he sent you to. That's where you give all things called tithe. Now, as far as giving to other ministries like food banks, etc., those are for offerings, not for tithes. The tithes goes within the house of Elohim. You deal with we read those verses today. You're going to take care of the people in the body first. It's not that I don't care about the people in the food banks. We as a ministry may decide to support a food bank, okay, after we know we've taken care of all the other things that we need to do. And that's something you can recommend and suggest, hey, we have a food bank we think does really good work. You might want to consider supporting them. Great, let us know who they are. Let us get more information about it, and we might do that. Does that make sense? Okay? But the first people we need to take care of is those inside the body. That is the people who are covenanted, the people that are heirs, the ones who are thinking about being covenanted. That's who we take care of first. That's according to what we read today, actually. We read those verses. Okay, what else you got?
Okay, it seems like one more from Aurora La. She's asking about people that are solely on welfare and don't actually have any income that is self-produced. Would they tithe
Nope.
on that?
No tithing unless you produce the income. You want to make an offering? Hey, maybe for whatever reason, a situation happened where you end up with extra whatever benevolence you get, and you feel like you'd like to give $20 to the ministry or $10, whatever it is. Hey, that's great. If that's your heart move to do so, it's an offering. I'll give you an example. We have Rabbi Tom. Rabbi Tom is on disability. I mean, you've all seen him up here in his wheelchair. However, he doesn't like not giving anything. He really has a heart to help. And so he makes offerings. He's not tithing, though. Okay? And it frustrates him. He wants to. But we have to call a thing what it is. It's a word that has a specific definition. A tithe is a tenth of the effort that is produced by effort. It's a tenth of the produce from effort. Okay? Benevolence is not that. So if you're on disability, military disability, Social Security disability, any kind of benevolence whatsoever that's taking care and providing your needs, that's not tithable. You didn't do anything to earn it. As a matter of fact, you're getting it because you can't earn. Okay? So that's not tithable. That doesn't mean you can't make an offering. It also doesn't mean you have to. The problem is that all of us have ego problems, and sometimes it's an ego of humility. We don't like getting benevolence, so we feel like we want to do something so that we don't just be a recipient. There actually is a good part of our ego that doesn't like to just be the end point. We want to do something to give back. And that's good. That's good. But it's hard sometimes to realize that you can't. And that's hard too. And so you do what you can. But tithing is not on benevolence, Social Security disabilities, any kind of disability, any kind of a medical benefit, any kind of an insurance benefit. There's no tithing on that. You can make an offering. There's no tithing. Give you an example. Let's say you get injured and you get a big giant workers' comp, benefit that you don't need all of. I mean, you get some sort of great settlement because you got injured in a workplace or someplace, and you get this tremendous check. You can make an offering on that if you want. You don't have to, but it wouldn't be tithing. You're getting it as a compensation. As a compensation. Hello, Miss Shira. Look at you walking in. It's just good to see you walking. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I've been stalling as long as I could. She called me and said she might try to come today after the service, just for the Hanukkah celebration. She was on the live stream earlier. All right, well, we're just wrapping it up just in time when you got here. Okay, so anything else over there?
Yes, one question that kind of correlates with that. I don't think it's scripturally based, but how do you decide on the amount of offering that you want to give out of your income?
Okay. In Scripture, it talks to you that you're supposed to, when you're giving your offerings, you give as your heart is moved based on how you've been blessed. So you're supposed to think about all the blessings you have, and not just financial, and let that motivate you. And by the way, I would say that often it's the first number that comes in your head that you didn't like, thought was too big, and then you want to go something smaller. Because the Ruach might inspire that first number. Everybody's laughing who knows what I'm talking about. All of a sudden you get that number, $100, and you're like, wait, I was thinking 20. Oh no, but your head popped up with 100. So you may want to go with what your head came up with. Now it could be just you pushing that number, but it could be the Ruach. I would analyze whatever first number pops in your head as being possibly the right one. I've seen that with myself. That when that number comes out, I first feel really good about it until I start thinking about how big that number actually was. Then all of a sudden I'm holding on to that money. I want to pulling it back instead of letting it go. So that would be just something to think about. But you're supposed to give based on how you've been blessed is what it talks about in Scripture. And that's really, it's really a part of it. I want to give a testimony. I remember when we were broke, when I was on my 7-year journey, we were broke at one point, and there was opportunity. Weren't part of any ministry at that time, wasn't in any kind of a system at that time, and I was in real estate, and the real estate company I was with had a benevolence part of it where they took care of their own agents in places where there might have been a natural disaster, like a hurricane came in or tornado wiped out some of the people in a town, and some of the agents may have been there. And so at every kind of meeting, they always had a little jar there to put in their little benevolence thing. And when I was at our brokest and wasn't making any sales, I took whatever was in my pocket and I stuck it in there just to start the giving ball rolling, and it always worked. And I always just took out and gave whatever the first thought that came in my head. I reach in my pocket, pull something out, stick it in there. And I didn't hardly have anything. I really believe, though, that act of faith, knowing that I was doing it to show that I trust that more will come. Now, I wasn't giving it at that time to a tithe or to a group. We were in nowhere's land for 8 years. That's a whole nother story, right? But I just took it on faith to give something. So it was giving out of my heart to participate, knowing that would hopefully start the ball rolling so I could give more. Not so I could get more, but so I can give more. So I could be more useful to people and to my family and everybody else. So I think sometimes the amount that you need to give is going to be motivated by how much you actually need to get. You might need to give some. I don't mean make yourself broke, $1,000 seed and all that kind of thing, but I mean just, when you think that you can afford it the least, you might want to just take that widow's mite and just give something. Just start the system moving. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, that's my personal experience. It happened, and right away, I would end up making a sale or doing something else, and something would be going in. Works. There were times, Julie will tell you this, times that even in the ministry when we first started years and years ago, that we really were suffering. We didn't have a lot of money. We had a lot of groups that were really small, very poor. Our offering box often wasn't even enough to pay for the building we were renting, the $50 a week. And she'll come over to me and look at me and I'll say, we need to give away more stuff. And I'd find people to give Bibles to. Uncle Bob will tell you that. I mean, we just had to give away more stuff. And she would look at me like, I know that's counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. And so, I found more excuses to give. We used to give away, we used to have on the table not only the tapes of the teachings, but Bibles. We used to have these, the softcover Bibles. And we gave away 2 or 3 a week. at $20 a pop. They were free. We just gave them away. And my wife kept looking at me like, we can't afford the rent on the building. You're giving away Bibles. But then you know what would happen? I'd go visit somebody, and they'd introduce me to their neighbor, and their neighbor would say, we've been tithing all year, didn't know what to do with it. Here's an envelope, and the envelope had $1,000 in it. I believe that's connected to my giving away a free Bible. That's my belief. You can believe what you want. But I believe that that's connected to my realizing when things are not flowing, I'm not giving enough. So if your finances aren't flowing, give more. It doesn't have to be physically giving more money. Just give. Give your time, give your effort, give your something. Just give. Find opportunities to be a giver, if that makes any sense. All right? I have found it always works. Others of you know that you've had the same experience. It always works. By the way, not immediately and not the way you think. I'll give you an example. Lady came to visit us in Knoxville, and they were just visiting from, I don't know, the Carolinas or somewhere. If it was Georgia, it was like Savannah someplace. It was like way far, and they're probably never going to come by ever again. They wanted a Bible, didn't have any money to buy one, and so I went to my car, took one out, and gave it to, I don't know, it was probably a young lady, like the oldest daughter of the family. She was probably like 19 or 20, and I gave her a Bible. And my wife looked at me like, you're never going to see these people again. I'm not picking on my wife. I mean, that's just a normal thing. I was like, yeah, I know that. I'm trying to be, I felt led to just, I'm not worried about it. Give. And Manny could tell you that, and others who've been at our ministry, Robert could tell you that. I always say yes, just give it away. Just mail it to him. Just send it to him. I don't, We just always give more. That's why we give away all those CDs for free. Because without that, we wouldn't even have a chance to buy the house we just bought for the ministry and this other property. I believe that's all because we give away everything for free. And now here's the problem. All of you would do this. You'd give away something, and then you're going to sit there and want to reap a harvest right there where you gave it away. And behind you is about 12 feet of harvest that you're ignoring, but I want to reap it right there. And you're going to sit and just stare at it, and nothing's happening. Because it's not always a direct correlation. Maybe you need love. Maybe you need patience. Maybe you need to be treated a certain way. Maybe you need a new job. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. But giving is going to bring what you need. Give what you can and you'll get what you need. I mean, that's really the key. But don't think it has to be direct. I mean, the ministries out there love to make it sound like, put your $1,000 seed and you'll end up with like $1 million back. No, it's not a money for money thing. Maybe you don't need money, but you have money. So put money and you'll get something else that you need because you need something else. Maybe you have no money, so give what you do have. Maybe you'll get money. I mean, it's a matter of giving what you can, getting what you need. Does that make any sense? That's his system. So find opportunities to give.